Okay, so now we're going to be giving quadratic equations. We're not going to be solving them, but we are going to be given them in vertex form and transforming them into standard form. And then going backwards, we're going to be given an equation in standard form and transforming it into vertex form. Now, given it in vertex form and transforming into standard form, what we're going to do is we're basically just going to simplify here. So I have a y is equal to a 6, and instead of just having an x minus a 4 squared, I'm going to rewrite it as an x minus a 4 times an x minus a 4. And then I have this minus 1 on the end. I'm going to show you the long way to do this problem or these types of problems, and then in number 2, I'll show you a shorter way. So now we're going to FOIL the x minus 4 times the x minus 4. So I'm going to have an y is equal to a 6 times, and so I still need to leave this in parentheses because the 6 is going to be multiplied by the x minus 4 times x minus 4. So an x times an x is an x squared. An x times a minus 4 is a minus 4x. A negative 4 times an x is another minus 4x. And a negative 4 times a negative 4 is a plus 16. And then I still have that minus 1 on the outside. And now I'm going to use the distributive property to distribute the 6 into parentheses. So I have a 6x squared minus a 24x minus another 24x plus a 96. And then I have this minus 1 on the end. Lastly, combining like terms, I have y is equal to a 6x squared. A negative 24 minus a 24x is going to be a minus 48x. And then a 96 minus a 1 is going to be a 95. And now this is in standard form from vertex form. All right. In number 2, I'm going to show you a little bit of a quicker way, a shortcut per se. So we have y is equal to a negative 5, and then I'm going to show you how to do the x minus 1 squared without FOILing. What we can do is we can square the first term, so I get an x squared, multiply this first term by the last term, and then multiply by 2. So an x times a negative 1 is a negative 1x, and then times a 2 would be a negative 2x. And then we square the last term. A negative 1 squared is a plus 1. And then I have a plus 4. If you like the way that we did in number 1 better, that's okay. You can use that way. I do not care. Y is equal to a negative 5 times an x squared is a negative 5x squared. A negative 5 times a negative 2x is a plus 10x. A negative 5 times a plus 1 is a minus 5. And then we have that plus 4 on the outside. And now we're going to combine like terms. Y is equal to a negative 5x squared plus a 10x minus a 1. And now that is in standard form. All right, looking at number 3. Same type of deal here. I'm going to show you the shortcut. So I have a y is equal to a 1/2, and then parentheses using my shortcut. I square my first term. I multiply my 2 terms together to get a 4x, and then I multiply that by 2, so that's going to be an 8x. And then I square my last term, which is going to give me a plus 16. And then I have a plus 6 on the outside. Now I'm going to distribute the 1/2 in. So I have y is equal to a 1/2 x squared plus a 4x plus an 8. And then I have that plus 6 on the outside. So now combining like terms, I have a y is equal to a 1/2 x squared plus a 4x plus a 14. And that is now in standard form. All right, looking at number 4, same thing. I'm going to show you the shortcut. Y is equal to a negative 1/3, and then I square my first term to get an x squared. I multiply the two terms together, which would give me a 6x, and then I multiply by 2 to give me a plus 12x, and then I square my last term, which would be a plus 36. And then I have that minus 1 on the outside. Now distributing the negative 1/3 in, I would have a y is equal to a negative 1/3 x squared minus a 4x minus a 12 minus a 1. Combining like terms, I wind up with y is equal to a negative 1/3, and sorry, this should be an x squared minus a 4x minus a 13, and that is now in standard form. All right, so that's going from vertex form to standard form. Now we're going to go from standard form to vertex form. Actually, this is a modified version of completing the square. We're first going to move our constant to the side that the y value is on. Okay, so now I have a y minus a 71 is equal to an x squared plus a 16x. Now I'm going to take my b value, which is 16. I'm going to divide by 2, and I'm going to square that number. A 16 divided by a 2 is an 8, and 8 squared is a 64. I'm going to add that 64 to both sides to keep this equation balanced. A y minus 71 plus 64, I'm going to simplify there. So I get a y minus a 7 is equal to, and now I factor my right side by taking the square root of my first term, the square root of my 64, my last term, the operation in between my first and second term, and squaring that binomial. Finally, I isolate y again by adding 7 to both sides. So I have a y is equal to an x plus 8 squared plus a 7. This is now in vertex form. So same thing with number 6. We're first going to start off by getting the constant to the side that the y value is on. So I have a y plus a 5 is equal to an x squared minus a 2x. Now I'm making a perfect square binomial by taking my b value, dividing by 2, and squaring that number. A negative 2 divided by a 2 is a 1. Negative 1, a negative 1 squared is a 1. I'm going to add that 1 to both sides. On the left side, I just simplify this into a y plus a 6. On the right, I factor. I take the square root of my first term, which would be x, square root of my last term, which would be 1, and the operation in between my first and second term, which is a minus sign, and I square that binomial. Now I'm going to isolate y again by subtracting 6 from both sides, and now I have my equation in vertex form. Looking at number 7, remember when we complete the square, we need to have our coefficient of x squared being 1. Right now my coefficient of x squared is negative 1. So to start this problem off, I do need to divide everything by negative 1, including the y. That is the biggest mistake. A lot of times students forget to divide the y by the number. Y divided by a negative 1 is a negative y. That will equal a negative x squared divided by a negative 1, gives me now a positive x squared. A negative 14x divided by a negative 1 is a plus 14x. A negative 59 divided by a negative 1 is a plus 59. We are now going to get the constant to the other side. I'm going to subtract 59 from both sides. Okay, so I have a negative y minus a 59 is equal to an x squared plus a 14x. I now take my b value, which in this case is 14. I divide by 2, and then I square that number. A 14 divided by a 2 is a 7. A 7 squared is a 49. I'm going to add 49 to both sides. All right, on the left side, I am going to simplify. I have a negative y minus a 10 is equal to, on the right side I factor. Take the square root of the first term, square root of the last term, and the operation in between my first and second term, and I square that binomial. Now I'm going to get the 10 to the other side by adding it. But we are not done, because y is not isolated. I do need to get that negative back over to the right side, and how I do that is I'm going to divide by a negative 1 on both sides. And listen carefully. When I divide by a negative 1, I'm left with a y is equal to. This is considered one term. So all I do is I attach the negative 1 on the outside of my x plus 7 squared. And then this is considered a term. So a 10 divided by a negative 1 is a minus 10. This is now in the correct vertex form. All right, so same thing with number 8. We need our coefficient of x squared to be 1. So I'm going to start off by dividing by 2. But I need to divide everything by 2, including the y. So how I'm going to write the y is I'm going to write it as a 1/2 y. You can write it as a y over 2 as well. A 2x squared divided by a 2 would give you an x squared. Plus a 36 divided by a 2 gives you an 18x. And then plus a 170 divided by a 2 gives you an 85. Now we work to bring our constant over to the side that the y is on. So I have a 1/2 y minus an 85 is equal to an x squared plus an 18x. I take my b value, which in this case is 18. I divide by 2, which is a 9. And squaring that number, I get an 81. I'm going to add that 81 to both sides to keep this equation balanced. Now, on the left side, I'm going to actually simplify. So I have a 1/2 y minus a 4. And on the right side, I take the square root of my first term, which is x, square root of my last term, which would be 9, and the operation in between my first and second term, which is a plus sign, and I square that binomial. Now I work to isolate y by first adding 4 to both sides. So I have a 1/2 y is equal to an x plus a 9 squared plus 4. And then I'm going to multiply by 2 on both sides. But when I multiply this side by 2, I need to multiply both terms by 2. So technically the x plus 9 squared is just one term in itself. So I leave the 2 on the outside of that. And then plus a 2 times the 4 is going to be an 8. Now this is in the correct vertex form. And that brings us to the end of this lesson. You can now go ahead and practice the level 3.